Thank you everyone for joining us today on this very exciting topic of how to establish an I&D program in your company. My name is Theresa Richardson. I am Withum Smith & Brown's Chief Talent Officer, basically oversee everything and anything to do with our #1 asset, our talent, in terms of HR, recruiting, learning development, coaching, and of course, inclusion and diversity. I now turn it over to Bill Bradshaw to introduce himself.
Awesome. Thank you, Theresa, for joining me today and having one of these most engaging conversations we can have around a topic that has really come full circle in the work that we do, not only here in professional services but everywhere. So I'm really looking forward to just sharing a conversation and share out with our members that what and how to get into this work and what it should look like. So that's our plan. Theresa, like Theresa mentioned, Bill Bradshaw, Director of Inclusion and Diversity at Withum. I'm celebrating just my year here with the firm, so super excited and supercharged to do this work here with the great people at Withum.
Excellent. So Bill, why don't we kick things off with a quick question, because I'm sure some people are wondering, just by this title page of I&D, we hear about D&I, we hear DEI, DIB. Tell us, what are all these? Why do we put the I before D? What do all these initials mean?
Yeah, interesting, T. So here at Withum, we lead with inclusion. So we lead with asking our folks to dance. So when I think of the words diversity, inclusion, equity, I kind of play them up a little bit differently, right? And I did not coin these phrases. They've been around for quite some time. But diversity is being invited to a party. Inclusion is being asked to dance. Here at Withum, we want all of our people to dance. And not only do we want them to dance, we want them to dance to their own music. So the equity piece is where you get to pick your own music. So if you take anything away from our talk today, it'll be get invited to the party, get out there on the floor and dance, and whatever music you want, let us know what it is so we can make sure that you dance to your own beat, to your own groove, to your own vibe. And that's so important nowadays because each of those individual words, the definitions matter, and they might be a little bit different depending on where you are and what your organization looks like. But back to the question, we lead with inclusion. Withum leads with inclusion because we believe that at the crux of our organization, and for us to be successful, our team members need to be able to dance. They need to be able to dance for themselves and dance for our clients.
So Bill, you mentioned you've been with us for about a year now.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us, how did we get here? Like, how did we get from point A to point B? There's a lot of people here listening in, trying to figure out where do they start? How do they start? Now, and we're going to go through a lot of information, I know, but maybe just tell how we got to this point now.
Yeah, so what we'll do is, and we'll take you through the slide deck. It's kind of like we put together 10 steps of what that might look like, for an organization to go through. So I think the first step in doing this work is to really assess where we're at. And I know before I came on board, Theresa and the team did an assessment of where we're at, what we need. So really figuring out in your organization where you're at, what you need, and why that matters. And that's important because it sets the foundation for how you're going to establish this program, right? So we have to get a good base coat, a good starting point to see where we're at and how ready our people and our leaders are to do this work. So that's, I would say, step one is really understanding where that is. Jennifer, if you could take us to the next slide. So again, like I'm reiterating, assessing your organization's DEI priorities. So really, where are we, where we're at? What does that look like? How does it feel? What's it gonna look specifically where you are? Because this work is similar, right? You can do this work similarly anywhere, but you have to really understand what the strategic priority is for your organization, who you need to get buy-in from, where your leaders are, and make sure that everyone can see themselves in doing this work.
Excellent. So Bill, I'm gonna deviate off the slide for a little bit, and I got another question I want to throw at you. One of the things you taught me I'm starting at the beginning again. So one of the things you taught me was the diversity iceberg.
Yep.
Can you talk about a little bit about what it is? Maybe share, what are some of the understandings behind it?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So in doing this work, we quite often talk about differences, right? Because diversity is what makes us each unique, makes us each, individual. But there's also so many similarities that we just don't know we each have amongst each other. So quite often when you look at an iceberg, what do you see? You see the small piece that's at top. It's above the water. So for me, the most meaty part of our people, our team members, is what's underneath the surface that we don't know. So we spend a lot of time with them trying to understand what makes up that bottom of the iceberg. What really are the lenses that you show up with at work every day that we cannot see? So, we constantly have those conversations on really trying to understand what's under your iceberg, what are those qualities, what are those lenses that you possess that someone might not see, but then also how there's so many people that are similar to you in the fact that we don't know what theirs are either. So recently over the summer, we asked our team members to share out kind of what's in your iceberg. And we got some great responses, whether it's your parental status, your religious or faith orientation, whether it's your sexual orientation, your gender status, military status, your education status, anything that's non-visible to the eye. Because most of the things that we can see above the surface would be race, gender, ethnicity, sometimes age. But there's so much more to our people than what we can see. So really, to understand our folks and for have them connect, across the firm, the best place to be is under that iceberg, sharing those qualities, sharing those lenses, and really, getting to know each other on a more in-depth level.
Excellent. Your slide here talks about, building out your framework. So let's talk a little bit about framework. Professional services firms like Withum and companies, right, are unique in many ways. Do you think you could share your thoughts on what a strategic framework on IND might look like for firms or companies like Withum?
Sure. Great question. So, again, this work is not very different from where it started. It's how it's relatable to where we are. So when I think of this work, I always think about our number one asset anywhere you are is always going to be your people. So our people pillar within this work, what we call workforce. So it's all about our individuals, our team members, how we attract, recruit, retain, develop, advance, promote our people. So all the programs that are surrounded that, not for just underrepresented talent, but for all of our talent, right? How can we bring in the best class people if we are not a best class organization? So really understanding what makes our people think that Withum is the best place to work, right? Number one. The middle pillar, which we call workplaces, okay, we got all these people, we bring them in, and then what's next? How do we make Withum a great place to work? So there is where you'll see learning and development opportunities, making sure that our folks are engaged with awareness campaigns. You'll see what we coin here at Withum as team member resource groups or employee resource groups or business resource groups, where you see pockets of folks that'll connect together to start mentoring each other, sponsoring each other, really doing that, that interweaving of narrative and networking there. And then we have that external piece, which is building our brand and our marketplace and our communities. So all this great work that we do here, we want to make sure that our clients are engaged and see what we're doing as well. So we go out and we make sure that we benchmark against other folks. We look for external partnerships to have with people. We look for opportunities to work amongst and with our clients, what they're doing, and share out with them and work to enhance the client value proposition that we present. And in that piece, and that last piece is a word called community. And that's so important because we want to make sure that we're giving back to the communities that we serve. So when I think of strategic framework, I think of those three pillars: workforce, workplace, marketplace / community. And again, they can all be a little different depending on what your organization looks like.
Fantastic. And the last bullet point before we go to the next slide is creating a council. Well, I know we're in the process here of creating our own council.
Yep.
Maybe you could talk to us about that a little bit.
Yeah, so it's interesting, Theresa, because when I came on board, a lot of times this work starts with the council, groundswell, right? There's a groundswell, and then they say, okay, we need this. So you all had that before I came. You had that groundswell. You had those team member groups working for us. So thinking about what makes sense, it's interesting because I know you and I have had this conversation on who's the council, who should be on the council, what do we call it, when do we launch it? But it's really, to me, it's been really a cool thing because as we've gone through this year journey, we've kind of seen what we need and what we don't need, right? So we now know kind of what that council should be. And creating a council is basically creating a network of individuals that are going to champion this work throughout your organization. So here at Withum, we want folks in our tax function, audit function, and advisory function to be doing this work. We want folks at all different levels, right? We want folks from our firm admin teams to make sure that they're represented. So you really want a representation across all functioning departments or business units across your organization that are going to be champions in doing this work when you're not in the room. So super important part, where you put it in your organization, at which step. I mean, I had it listed there third, doesn't mean you could do it third. It could be one, it could be two, but I think once you know what the priority is, once you build out what your framework is going to look like, and then you put your framework into place, you start to see things fall out. And then you can say, okay, what are we missing? And that what are we missing piece is, let me bring in our stakeholders, let me bring in these champions, and let them be ambassadors to continue to push this work together and this awareness together.
Excellent. Jen, can you continue the next slide? So I know we talked about defining the different definitions up front. So what we'll do is move into workforce like data transparency. I of course have another question for you there, Bill. All of this so far sounds really great. But as they say, what gets measured gets managed. Tell me a little bit about the metrics and how we can measure the impact of our I&D initiatives at the firm.
Yeah, so great question. And I would say if you're not measuring it and we're not looking at it, then we're getting it wrong. So you have to know where you started, right? So when you got into this work, where were we? And when I say measurement, I think about from a people perspective, what have we done to increase underrepresentation at the organization? And it's not always going to be a real fast win, right? So if we are gradually seeing increases in our underrepresented talent, which at Withum we define as female talent, LGBTQ, people of color, which includes our Black individuals, our Latinx, and our Asia Pacific Islander, people with disabilities, and our veterans. So there's 7 groups that we consider underrepresented. So we look at what that talent swing is, and obviously we don't have measurement for each of those groups because they're not all self-identifying at the same time, or there's not tools for them to self-identify. But if we look at the transparency of that data and where we are in the I would say life cycle of the individual or life cycle of the team member, someone comes into the organization, obviously we want them to be who they are, where they are. So we want them to share about themselves, we want them to self-identify for purposes of their own good, so we can see who's at the firm. And believe it or not, Theresa, our clients want to know. Our clients want to know who's at the organization. So back to the question of how do we do that? What does it look like? It looks like capturing data, just on a spreadsheet. It's like you would anywhere, for anything else. Who we are, who we have right now, and then constantly looking for ways to increase representation and looking for ways to enhance the experience. So it's not just about, let me go out and bring in additional people that are underrepresented in the organization, but we have to enhance their experience if they want to stay and grow here. So I think that it's kind of a two cycle piece. Yes, we need to grow our underrepresented talent, but at the same time, we need to listen and learn to the talent that we do have here and what we could do better and what we're not doing and what we're not seeing. And that measurement piece, believe it or not, falls back to a lot of the surveys and benchmarking surveys that we do to find out where we are. So I'll give you one quick example. This year we went out to Disability In and we said, hey, you have a disability equality index. We'd like to fill it out. We had no idea where we were going to land. We had no idea what all the great things that we actually were already offering the firm. And they gave us the metrics to say, measure what you're doing. And we started measuring what we were doing. And believe it or not, year one, we were at 90%. 90% year one, we didn't change anything. So really understanding the measurement piece comes in multiple different ways. It can come on what your workforce looks like. It can come in as how many people are just staying at the firm and building their career at the firm. And then it can also come from measuring yourself against others. So I think it's a three-piece approach.
Oh, great. And sticking to that point of underrepresented talent, if we look at the percentage of underrepresented talent in professional service firms, what is the benchmark leaders should look to achieve and how do they get there? And maybe you could talk about maybe some of the averages you've seen.
Yeah, absolutely. So, from a gender perspective, male, female, I'll use as just as a benchmark. Most firms are teetering around that 50-50% mark. But what we're asking folks to do is peel back that onion. 50-50 looks great, but where's the leadership roles, right? Like we want to really get, so is it 50-50% up until you're at manager and then it kind of drops off, or how does that work? So really helping understand from a sheer firm perspective, we may look 50-50% from a gender role, but really looking at what those numbers are as the levels increase. And then also from I would say a representation ethnicity perspective, typically we're looking at 25 to 30% of those folks that identify as underrepresented. So the whole school of thought here is we really can't push out self-identification to truly understand who's here until people feel like they have that sense of belonging, right? So many times we'll be like, well, we want to know who's here. Let's put out self-ID. And everyone's like, we get crickets because they don't know that they could be who they are, where they are. So we want to make sure that we're able to capture that data, that folks are coming to us and saying, hey, where can I fill out that I'm a veteran? Because I want to make sure that I'm captured. I also want to make sure that I get the best-in-class benefits that you all offer for veterans. So I think that's important as well.
Excellent. I think we can move on over to the next slide.
Yeah, and this piece, Tay, just to be honest, it covers a little bit more in depth about what ERGs are, right? So just to share with the folks that are dialing in or that are going to be listening in, employee resource groups, we call them team member resource groups. This is kind of once you get in, you figure out what it looks like. This is kind of just some steps on how to the interworkings of employee resource groups. Obviously, find volunteers to lead them, develop metrics to measure them, as Theresa said earlier. What gets measured that gets managed, and then obviously schedule meetings to monitor and measure the goals that they set for themselves all year. We could probably flip to the next one. Yep. So this is the third pillar, T,
yep.
of this work. So we went through workforce, we went through workplace, marketplace again as well. Looking at the impact we have on that our clients can see, but then also, are we being good corporate stewards? Like, what are we doing for our community? Are we being good stewards of the community? So do we do business with diverse clients, women-owned, Black-owned, veteran-owned businesses? Are we capturing that data? What benchmarking tools, like I just talked about the DEI, are we benchmarking ourselves against other organizations and what they're doing? And are you actively looking to bring in diverse suppliers, which I think is really important. So I'll touch on it really, really small because not everyone's in that space yet. But when you think about buying pens, right? Because I'm holding one in my hand. If you're thinking about buying pens, we can go to WB Mason, we go to Staples, whatever, a promotional item. Is there an opportunity to do business with a Black-owned business, a female-owned business, a service-disabled-owned veteran business to give back to those communities that are in our area? So always think and challenge, are we just going for lowest price? Which again, and they're competitive as well. I mean, our diverse suppliers know they have to be competitive. Think if there's an opportunity for us to connect with those vendors that we might not have in the past.
Great advice. Great advice. I think we have one last slide left, and I have more questions for sure. So this last slide talks about creating KPIs and how we measure at year end and throughout the year, I should say. Anything you want to talk about on KPIs, Bill?
I just like we kind of beat it in that you have to measure it, and I think that was about what I'm really trying to get at is measure, and share, right? Because all of this stuff costs money. So in order to get money, you have to create the metrics. You have to show the ROI on the work that you're doing.
Okay. Here's another question for you. I've heard you say personally many times, we don't know what we don't know. How can we help others on this journey that are listening in today, on how, you can share for viewers, to look up. Maybe there's information out there that they could look up or after today that, say, hey, I need a little bit more on this. Where can they go?
Yeah. Great way to segue us out of this for sure, Theresa. There is so many different channels of information that can come at you from a DEI perspective. What I would say is sign up to some of the largest ones, Diversity Best Practices, Diversity Inc., Working Mother Media, Catalyst. They're all great research-driven organizations that bring in best-in-class white paper research, and they produce it out. And most of it's, you sign up on a listserv and it's free. What I would say is be curious with your own people and do your own kind of fact-finding, right? Like just be constantly curious and engage your leaders in this journey. So bring in the people that matter, right? Engage your leaders in this work. Make sure that folks, that you're visible, that this work is visible. You're not just speaking this work, you're actually walking and doing this work. So when we ask folks to do something, we're doing it as well as we walk along with them, right? When we're asking folks to raise their hand and be vulnerable and be authentic and say, yes, I am a person with a disability, so is our leader, right? So really being candid with who we are. And you're right, I always say you don't know what you don't know, because I wake up every day thinking I know it all, and I learn something new every day. So you don't know what you don't know, but what I do know is everyone will learn something when they're able to kind of have these in-depth conversations, share candidly across difference, understand what that looks like. What does difference look like? Why does it matter? What does inclusion look like? Why does it matter? Are our policies equitable? Are they for everyone? And what are we missing? The only way to find this out is what are we missing? We need to hear back from our people, because if we don't hear back from our people, we don't know what we're missing. And encourage them to be, represented at the firm. So we have to know they're here in order to give them best-in-class benefits.
Great, solid points there, Bill. Talking about, our people and what they've experienced, I do have a question relating to that. I'd be remiss if I didn't ask what's your advice on how to handle some of our current events. There's been so many events that have happened through the last year that affected all of our people. Can you share some thoughts around this?
Yeah, and it's been a rough year. It's been a rough few years, 18 months, pandemic, folks working from home. I quite often say, I never thought I'd be opening my kitchen house world to millions of people across the world over the last 18 months, but everyone's seen my dogs. Everyone knows what my kitchen looks like. So we really had to learn to navigate some personal things, but then also some stuff that happens outside these walls that isn't fun. And what I encourage our leaders and I encourage all of our people to do is come from a place of awareness. So understand that D&I, I&D, DE&I, whatever you want to call it, is about creating awareness. It's an awareness campaign, okay? Acknowledgement of facts and awareness. So when incidents happen outside the four walls of where we come to work, whether they're virtually or they're hard walls, we don't control that. But what we can control is how our people feel connected to who we are at the firm. And what I would say is that your leaders need to be made aware of what's happening. Many of them are aware, they just don't know how to share that awareness. So I'm going to give you a really current example. Theresa and I have an Asian TMRG, team member resource group. There was a lot of Asian hate crimes that were happening a few months ago. And I said to Theresa, I'm just going to throw a meeting on the calendar. Let's just jump on the call. Not planned. If you can get in, you can get in. If you can't, you can't. And within 35, 40 minutes, we had 10, 15, 20 people on the call. And we found out so much about our people that were hurting, that were scared, that were fearful, that we would have never found out. And again, we didn't come at it from a place of, this is great, let's tout our horn. It's how can we make it better for our people? What can we do to make our people feel safe? And by doing that, the amount of camaraderie, the amount of feeling that your leaders are supported, that you're being seen, right? And that as leaders, we are aware of what's going on outside here, not just what's going on inside here. So it really is an awareness campaign. It really is an awareness tool and an acknowledgement tool to remove it. And it can be squirrely. I'm not going to lie. It can be very squirrely. It's a slippery slope. We've all slipped and slide down it. But what I would say is you can't sit on the sidelines and say nothing. That's not an option.
Bill, we have just about a minute left. So much great information today, packed in just a short time. Any last tidbits, piece of advice you want to share with anybody on the call?
I would say raise your hand, get involved, ask about this work. If you think you're not connected to it, you are. Don't think that because you're another white guy They're not connected to this work. I'm a white guy. I'm connected to this work in so many ways. Be curious. Take an opportunity to check in with your people. If I leave you one thing that you take nothing away from me is, remember to check in with your people, not just about what their tax return looks like or what the audit, where's the audit stand. Check in with your people to make sure that they're okay. And it's important today. It's important tomorrow. It's important forever, because people sometimes don't always share that. And you really need to make sure, and especially doing this work, that all of our people are, okay and dialed in. So thank you for the opportunity to share. Again, this is my experience. This has been my journey in doing this work. All of these opinions, expressions are of mine. So take what you want. Always happy to look for me on LinkedIn. Theresa as well. Find Theresa and myself on LinkedIn. We're constantly social media sharing. And thanks to our great team at Withum for making us look good and on camera.
Thank you all. Have a wonderful day.